An individual by the name of Nathalie Rose Jones is now in custody, charged with 2 federal crimes for knowingly and willfully threatening to take the life of the President of the United States. She did come from New York to Washington, D.C., and she has been threatening and calling for the removal of the president, and even worse, as she got to D.C., her threats were on Facebook and Instagram, and she continued to call the president a terrorist and was working to have him eliminated. She is now in custody. She will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Make no mistake about that.
Just weeks ago, Trump's handpicked attorney for Washington, D.C. and former Fox host Jeanine Pirro had some harsh words for this woman, Nathalie Rose Jones, who was arrested during a protest in D.C. for allegedly sending death threats to Donald Trump over social media. And as you heard, Pirro was giddy at the prospect of being able to throw the book at Jones for insulting her dear leader. However, as you can see, Pirro's tough talk didn't translate to the public spectacle she wanted it to, as a grand jury of D.C. residents flatly rejected the government's efforts to prosecute Jones, a statistically rare move in federal court since the government controls what information is presented to said grand jury to make its case. Jones was reportedly released under electronic monitoring and ordered to see a psychiatrist, which tracks with testimony from family and friends saying that she suffers from mental health issues, including schizophrenia, found in the released court documents. Now, this should obviously go without saying, but just to be clear, you should never send death threats to anyone, nor are we condoning the alleged threats and the charged language Jones used in her post. However, what's really interesting about this case is the insight it provides into the mindset of D.C. residents amid the federal takeover and militarization of the city. Recall this man. That was former DOJ employee Sean Dunn, who warranted the creation of an entire propaganda hype video for his arrest after throwing a Subway sandwich at a CBP agent, despite his lawyer trying to arrange for him to turn himself into the authorities in the meantime.
The president's message to the criminals was, if you spit, we hit. He thought it was funny. Well, he doesn't think it's funny today because we charged him with a felony, assault on a police officer, and we're going to back the police to the hilt. So there, stick your Subway sandwich somewhere else.
The left has found their new hero. A man is facing a felony assault charge after hurling his hoagie at a federal agent in D.C.
But there's a new sheriff in town, and the judge already hit him with something worse than a sandwich, a felony assault charge.
Not only did this Department of Justice employee exhibit an unhinged level of political bias, but he also demonstrated an extreme level of entitlement. And like so many on the left, I guess he probably thinks he's untouchable and believes that his views are so virtuous that maybe he thought he can get away with anything. May not sound like a big threat. What a lot of people may not be thinking of, an agent being assaulted like that, they have no idea what is being hurled at them. And this is now going to be charged as a felony.
Pirro and the administration even got a massive boost from their allies over at Fox News, presumably to help sway public opinion against Dunn and the rest of the protesters defending their communities from federal law enforcement. So let's see how that case turned out for Pirro.
There's at least one high-profile case where they're making a lot of headline news about the fact that you couldn't get a grand jury to indict.
You know, there are a lot of people who sit on juries and they live in, they live in Georgetown or in Northwest or in some of these better areas, and they don't see the reality of crime that is occurring. And my office has been instructed to move for the highest crime possible, consistent with the law, the statute, and the evidence. And in that one case, in that particular article, we were on point. But the grand jurors don't take it so seriously. They're like, whatever. In that case, we took it as a misdemeanor, and we'll go forward with it. The fact that they're so used to crime, that crime is so normalized in D.C. that they don't even care about whether or not the law is violated is the very essence of what my problem is in D.C.
Pirro's answer is just so laughable, right? because she's blaming the jurors for being out of touch with crime, insulting them pretty much, right? She's doing that instead of taking accountability for her own prosecutor's weak case. And there's just so much absurdity of trying to prosecute this particular case as a felony charge. Again, these are not serious people. Not serious people. When you listen to those comments, you're thinking, that's your argument? That's your reason for how we got here? Nope.
The Trump administration's attempt to illegally deport as many as 700 Guatemalan children in the dead of night over Labor Day weekend. The move was temporarily halted at the last minute by a federal judge. The National Immigration Law Center filed an emergency request to stop the deportation flights, arguing the children who arrived in the U.S. without their parents would face harm and abuse if they were returned to Guatemala. The appeals court wrote, quote, "It seems unlikely Congress intended in enacting IEPA to depart from its past practice and grant the president unlimited authority to impose tariffs. The statute neither mentions tariffs or any of its synonyms, nor has procedural safeguards that contain clear limits on the president's power to impose tariffs," end quote. The tariffs will remain in effect until October. Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, "If allowed to stand, this decision would literally destroy the United States of America," unquote. The decision encompasses two different cases that challenge the tariffs, one brought by a group of U.S. states led by Oregon, and the other brought by a group of businesses.
It's a good thing that the legal system is functioning the way it should be and is blocking some of the egregious moves by the administration. However, it could be a scary reality if the administration decides to reject the law, and potentially if the courts in some cases decide to capitulate to Trump and the administration plans. Listen, if they do that, if they bend to Trump and this administration's agenda, then we are in serious bad times. Like frightening, chilling, okay? So hopefully the courts do not do that. And hopefully if the administration decides to reject the law, there will be consequences and that people will punish them appropriately, okay? For Rebel HQ, I'm Chris Williamson. We'll see you next time.